you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And there's a lot of unintended consequences. And obviously we got to see what happens in Korea in terms of the meeting. But the last thing you want to see here is that U.S.-China, that sort of battle royale expands. Because once you start going down this path...
It's getting pretty heated, though.
Well, it's getting heated.
Yeah.
And then it speaks to this AI revolution. Look, this is a fourth industrial revolution. Both not just on the U.S. side, but on China's side, too. Last thing you want to do is throw sand in the gears in a situation like this. And that's how you start. Look, this is all a game of high-stakes poker. Everyone's trying to make their threat and left and right. But I ultimately do believe some sort of trade framework or a de-escalation is ultimately what happens, combined with this very strong tech earnings season. What that means is the bulls, I think, rage into year-end. This tech market, I still believe, has another 7-8% higher. And I think that's why...
Has legs, okay.
I think it still has legs, and I think this is still year 3 of an 8 to 10 year build out in terms of AI.
Chery.
Yeah, so Dan, what time is it? It's 7:09 Singapore, Hong Kong time, but what time is it at this AI party that goes on till what, 4 a.m. in the morning?
Yeah, so that party started at 9 p.m. It's about 10:30 p.m., but that party goes on to 4 a.m. And that's why I just say, like, the bears trying to watch that party through the glass, through the windows, they're going to miss what I believe is the second, third, fourth derivatives playing out across tech. And I think that's what you're seeing play out, from hyperscalers to what's happening on chips to ultimately even on the grid side. This party rages on, and that's why I believe we're going to be talking about NASDAQ 25,000 and ultimately what's going to be NASDAQ 30,000 over the coming years.
You've spent some time, a few days in the region. Do you think that there is a gap in the views around AI and AI investing, the whole bubble talk? And are you finding any interesting companies to cover or highlight in the tour?
Yeah, and in terms of the 2 weeks in Asia and halfway through it, I'd say, look, I think investors, obviously every meeting starts with, are we in a bubble? In my view, I mean, every meeting, it's like, oh, do you want coffee? Are we in an AI bubble? That's how every meeting starts. The reality is that as someone like myself that covered tech back in the late 90s, this is not a bubble. This is a true fourth industrial revolution playing out. Investors are massively underestimating demand. I'd say the difference now is you're seeing, especially across Asia on the memory side, the SK, Hynix. You look what's happening. I think some very strong positives happen potentially at Samsung. What's happening across semis that we're seeing in Taiwan. Look, demand to supply is 10 to 1 for NVIDIA chips. I just don't see how you could be bearish in that sentiment in terms of what's ultimately happening in terms of this demand curve that we're seeing. And I think that's why investors are looking, how do you play it? Who do you ultimately look at in terms of second, third, fourth derivatives? We talk about in our Ives AI 30, and that continues to be the winners.
Do you think perhaps the world or the public market actually needs to see some of these massive AI juggernauts that are private for now go public to really have a better understanding of AI valuations?
Yeah, I think, and it's a great point, because of course, like from OpenAI to Anthropic, Anduril, and others, look, and I think that's all, that potentially is on the horizon as we get into 2026, 2027, because it's like I was telling Martin and you, it's like we're in year 3 of an 8 to 10 year build out. I think public markets, you're going to see a massive activity in terms of real companies coming out that ultimately are kind of dictating this foundation of AI. And now it comes down as the use cases play out. Look, some will say, okay, is it a bubble? Circular financing, NVIDIA, OpenAI. I get that, but the reality is like you're building out a new economy, not just for enterprise, but for consumers. Look at what we see with Tesla, autonomous, robotics. I mean, that is the future. And I continue to think tech's in the left lane in a Ferrari going 100 miles an hour. And I'd rather do that than be in value 45 miles an hour in the right lane.
Okay. You mentioned Anduril. When is it coming to market, do you think?
Look, I think get the popcorn out, right? I mean, I think 2026 is going to be a very active year, right? I think across the board. Because, look, I think a lot of these companies, even though they can stay private, really as long as they want, given the funding, there is a time where you have to go public. Not just in terms of tapping financial markets, but especially in terms of brand and in terms of what's really happening in terms of this AI revolution. I think that's what we're going to see more and more of in 2026.
Would you feel more comfortable seeing some of these private AI names raising money by going public as opposed to taking on leverage, as opposed to taking on debt to fund their capex?
To me, it's public. Because, look, it comes down to private, where valuations are public, there's no gray. In other words, like what's the efficient price for that? And I think that's something where the public markets at first, you saw a huge gap between private and public markets. But now I think more and more, the investor appetite, look, it's also a scarcity value because there's more AI play, true AI plays. Not just because they say AI 40 times in their conference call doesn't mean that they're an AI play. True ones, that's what investors are really focused on.
How are you thinking about China and AI and potentially getting exposure there? Because they seem to have a much sort of lower cost model.
Look, I think on energy, they're clearly ahead, and we've seen it, front and center. I think they are about to go through their own industrial revolution. That speaks to why Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent. Look at the things that are happening in robotics as well. Look, there's only one chip in the world fueling the AI revolution. That's led by, of course, godfather of AI, Jensen NVIDIA. But China, you're seeing massive demand there, and I think big tech in China, in my opinion, is oversold. And I think that creates an opportunity, but also the way to play AI, it's not just US. You still have to play the China piece to really capture the trillions that are going to be spent over the coming years.
Are they going to get to commercialization, monetization, and returns faster than the hyperscalers, do you think?
Look, I think that, for China, that'll be a challenge in terms of, because there's no doubt for the first time in 30
Get the chips? Is that why?
For the first time in 30 years, U.S. is ahead of China when it comes to tech, right? But it comes down to you need those NVIDIA chips and the hyperscalers. Look, some of the biggest chips in the poker table right now are U.S. tech, NVIDIA, Palantir, Microsoft. And I think Trump administration recognized that, but that's all part of this negotiation. We start to see it next week. And I think that's when investors are trying to game out. With Trump, you're trying to figure out second, third steps in terms of where this all heads.